A cheering crowd stands on the docks as the HMS Erebus and the HMS Terror leave port. Captain John Franklin takes one last look through his spyglass at his wife. Tears fill her eyes as she waves goodbye to her beloved husband. Unfortunately, Captain Franklin will not be returning, and neither will the 129 other souls who set off on this expedition. It is May of 1845 when Terror and Erebus leave Britain for the Canadian Arctic. Their mission is to find a northwest passage to the Pacific Ocean. Captain Franklin is in charge of the expedition. He meets with Captain Francis Crozier, who is in command of the HMS Terror, to discuss their route and how they'll make it through the brutal landscape of the Arctic. The ships reach Nunavut, Canada in spring and wait patiently for the winter's ice to thaw. Once the weather begins to get warmer and the ice sheets break apart, the HMS Terror and Erebus sail into the deadly waters of the Arctic. Franklin is sure he'll find the Northwest Passage this time. He has failed twice before, and even though the course the ships will take is going to be brutal and dangerous, he must complete his mission. By July, the ice is thin enough for the expedition to commence. The sun stays up for nearly 24 hours. Still, the men take shifts making sure that the furnaces stay on so they don't freeze to death. Even with the endless sunlight, the temperatures can drop dangerously low. But the cold is not the only thing threatening the expedition. An animal that weighs nearly 1,000 pounds and blends into the white landscape stalks the crew. The Terror and Erebus make it through their first summer without any problems. They've made progress, but have still not found a passage into the waters of the Pacific. Unfortunately, there is no turning back now, and Captain Franklin knew that spending a winter on the ice was all but inevitable, but was hoping they'd be further along. The ships have been designed to winter in the Arctic. The rudders are raised out of the water so they're not damaged by the quickly freezing ice. As the nights become longer and longer, the temperatures drop lower and lower. The expedition comes to a complete halt and makes camp for winter. The ships are stocked with 2,700 pounds of candles, each to illuminate the black night of winter. Fires are lit, wicks burn, and the furnaces aboard the Terror and Erebus are fed. At all times during the winter months, Marines pace back and forth along the deck, keeping a watchful eye out for Arctic hunters that can tear a human limb from limb. The soldiers are also there to keep watch over the ships and maintain order. The crews of the Terror and Erebus are not the most loyal to the crown. Many are there for fortune and glory. The Marines make sure that the captain's orders are followed. The men haven't seen the sun in weeks. The darkness of night seems to go on forever. The temperature outside of the ship drops to negative 54 degrees Fahrenheit as the wind howls unrelentingly. Even with the furnaces and fires going at full blast, the men are freezing. They wear layer upon layer of clothing, but the cold still chills their bones. The crew must consume more calories than they would normally need just to keep their body temperatures up. In preparation for the coming thaw, the navigators of the expedition take measurements, being careful not to touch the metal instruments to their bare skin, as they would instantly freeze to one another. The crew hears the sounds of gunshots fill the air while they lay in their hammocks. It's unclear if the Marines are firing at shadows or if there's something out there terrorizing them in the dark. To pass the time, the men smoke or chew tobacco. They play board games and tell stories. Sometimes on a still night, the sky becomes illuminated with brilliant green, blues, and purples of the aurora borealis. The colors swirl across the sky as if painted by a brush from the heavens. The Arctic can be beautiful, but it's also deadly. The new route that Franklin has planned for the expedition takes the ships into some of the most isolated and desolate parts of the Arctic. The native Inuit people have a name for such a place. They call it Tununnik, meaning the back of beyond. This region of the world is so isolated that the Terror and Erebus will not be able to resupply. There are no native peoples or British outposts this far into the Arctic. The crew were warned about how brutal the landscape could be, but nothing prepared them for what was to come. Even with layers of clothing and the heat of the ships, frostbite affects everyone. Fingers, toes, and dead skin are amputated. As the crew leaves the ship to explore the surrounding area, they sweat from the strenuous activity of trudging through the hip-deep snow. But once they stop moving, their sweat freezes under their layers of clothing, causing them to stick and pull at their skin. And it's on these expeditions that the men need to keep a watchful eye on the horizon. Around each snowdrift or ice column, there could be an ambush waiting. The apex predator of this part of the world is the polar bear, and just before, as well as just after their hibernation, they are at their hungriest. These behemoths will eat anything they can find, including humans. Toward the end of the winter months, something horrible begins to happen. The crew are becoming restless and acting strange. It isn't only the cold or the endless nights that are getting to them, but something else entirely. The doctor finds that the teeth of the crew are falling out, and their skin is bruising easily. Both are signs of a deadly disease that plagues sailors, scurvy. The Terror and Erebus have been stocked with lemon and lime juice used to provide the crew with vitamin C and prevent the disease, but it seems as if there wasn't enough for the expedition. Another source of vitamin C can be obtained by consuming raw meat. The ships had been stocked with cows, sheep, and pigs at the beginning of the voyage, but all of the animals are long dead. However, there are other less common forms of meat on the ships. Captain Franklin has a pet monkey given to him by his wife. There's also an old Newfoundland dog named Neptune, and a cat that's there to eat any rats that might have stowed away before the expedition left. Unfortunately, all of these animals will perish with the crew. The sun begins to rise for brief periods of time each day. It stays up for longer and longer until eventually spring arrives. Finally, the ice cracks. The ships drop back into the water, and the expedition continues. The winter has been incredibly hard, and the stores of food and other resources are running low. The expedition needs to make it through the rest of Tununic and reach the Pacific Ocean before the next winter. Progress is slow during the summer of 1846. The temperature seems to never get above freezing, and the ice reforms in front of the ships before they can make any sort of progress. Franklin and the crews become frustrated. They're not going to make it. The days begin to get shorter again, the nights longer, until the unthinkable happens. Winter is upon the Terror and Erebus once again. The crew readies the ships for another winter on the ice. They know there's not enough food or fuel to make it through the next summer unless they can reach the Pacific. People begin to go crazy, but this isn't just out of panic. There's something else plaguing the crew, something that has gotten inside of them and is sending them to the brink of madness. The canned food is starting to go bad, but it isn't the food that's driving the crew insane, it's the cans themselves. They've been contaminated with lead, and this poison has seeped into the food that the crews of the Terror and Erebus have been eating for the last 2 years. As lead builds up in their bodies, it can cause irritability, loss of memory, and aggression. It's an awful winter as the crew literally begins to tear themselves apart. Men die from disease and the cold, and others are found deceased under mysterious circumstances. Spring finally comes, but the ice refuses to melt. Franklin and Crozier decide to send an expedition of men to Point Victory, where a cairn was erected by an earlier expedition. It's here that they leave the first written record of what the expedition has gone through. Only a couple months later, tragedy strikes. Captain John Franklin dies. It's unknown what the exact cause of his death was. Perhaps it was disease, or maybe the crew mutinied. We may never know. About 30 men have died now, and Captain Crozier is in charge of the expedition. He makes the decision to abandon the ships, load up sledges with equipment and the remaining food, and walk across the Arctic tundra to try to reach the nearest outpost or Inuit village. Crozier doesn't know how far they'll have to walk, but if they continue south, they should reach the Baxfish River. They then can use boats being used as sledges to make their way down the river and find help. Unfortunately, none of the members of the expedition make it that far. It's believed that the 105 men who left the Terror and Erebus perished in the frigid Arctic along the west coast of King William Island. Before heading further south, Crozier stopped at the cairn again to update the document that would later be known as the Victory Point Note. In it, Crozier writes, "The Terror and Erebus were deserted on the 22nd of April, 5 leagues north-northwest of this, having been beset since the 12th of September 1846. Crozier also mentions Captain John Franklin died on the 11th of June 1847, and the total loss by deaths in the expedition has been to this date 9 officers and 15 men. The last line of the note is the most tragic, as Crozier says that the remaining men will start making their way to Baxfish River the following day. As history shows, not a single person made it. So, what happened to the rest of the crew members of the Terror and Erebus? It can be theorized by the remains of several bodies found so far that some of the crew succumbed to the harsh weather and unrelenting cold of the region. They were probably exhausted, couldn't continue on, and froze to death. Also, it's not out of the realm of possibility that crew members were attacked and eaten by polar bears. Others most likely died from scurvy, starvation, lead poisoning, or a combination of all three. It's clear that some of the men resorted to cannibalism, as mutilated human remains from the expedition have also been found. The damage to their bodies are consistent with cuts caused by knives. Also, human bones were found still inside cooking pots. It is unclear if violence ever broke out between the members of the expedition or if they waited until their crew members had died of natural causes before consuming them. But one thing is clear: the last days for the survivors of the Terror and Erebus must have been horrible. The ships themselves were found by divers in 2014 and 2016. Both ships had sunk to the depths of the Arctic, but several diving expeditions have been able to take pictures and document the still eerily intact ships from the 1800s. However, the Terror and Erebus are raising more questions than they are answering. The two vessels were supposed to be tethered together, and yet they were found 45 miles apart. And something even more creepy was discovered. Researchers can't find any clear reason why the HMS Terror sank. The scientists who discovered the ship said it wasn't crushed by ice and there's no breach in the hull. However, the Terror seems to have sunk quickly and now rests gently on the bottom of the ocean, as if it were purposefully placed there. There's definitely more to the story of what happened to the crew of the HMS Terror and Erebus just waiting to be discovered. Now watch Why Did 9 Ships Disappear in Perfect Weather? Or check out real-life ghost story, Mystery of the Mary Celeste Ghost Ship.